All right, ladies and gentlemen, Hyco Reality fans, this is the interview you've been waiting for. We are sitting down to talk to the winner of Survivor All Stars, Shandy. Are you there?
I am here.
Well, first of all, congratulations. Finally, we can talk about this out in the open.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been almost 7 months since you won the title, and you've had to keep that under wraps that whole time. What do you have to say for yourself now that you can officially talk about winning Survivor All Stars?
Well, it's nice that I can finally say it, but at the same time, like I live in California, so a lot of the people that I played with and everything who would know more about it are back in Montana. So it's not like there's that many people I can talk about it with anyway, but it is nice for the people that were watching it with me that I can actually finally tell them what was going on.
Yeah, you've created quite a following for yourself though in California. You've made some viewers, some friends that are now closely following the show.
Yeah, Hiker Reality definitely has some new fans now.
So what
So
was it
yeah,
like watching yourself? What did you think of yourself this season? Obviously last time you enjoyed watching yourself, but that kind of came to an abrupt end. This
yeah,
time
very
you had
loved.
you had 12 complete episodes all about Shandy.
Yeah, no, it was it's always interesting to watch yourself. There are things, that you say that you don't even remember saying by the time it's aired, months and months later. But it was more than watching myself, it's really interesting to see everyone else and to see what everyone was saying in their confessionals because you have an idea of what's going on, but you never fully know what's going on until you see what people say in their confessionals. So even people that are your close allies that tell you almost everything, they're always going to be a little bit reserved. And so there are things that, came up in interviews that I was surprised to learn about. And that's always fun.
Okay, well we'll talk about the whole game and your whole experience, but let's focus right now on the finale that everyone just watched and your winning. How surprised were you that you won? Did you expect it? Did you once you made it to the end, how confident were you in your chance to win?
So going into it, like I said right before the final tribal council, I really did think that it was going to be really close, and I wasn't 100% confident that I was going to win, and I thought that it would be a 4-3 vote, and I didn't know which way that was going to go. As tribals started, I was getting a little bit nervous too that since Martha did make the biggest move of the game, that would outshine everything else. But then actually by the end of tribal, I was feeling a little bit more confident. So really, it wasn't until the end though that I thought like, okay, I kind of have this in the bag. Um, Throughout the whole season, I never really thought that I was definitely going to win it.
So you brought Martha to the end, which obviously now looks like that was a good decision. But do you think you would have had stood a good chance if you would have taken Darren?
Um, yeah, I think it's hard to say going back because I thought going into it that I had a better chance against Darren than Martha, but then I thought that I would just come off looking pretty bad if I voted out Martha. So that was a lot of what went into my decision to keep her. And but that being said, I think Darren had a really great underdog story that it did not even occur to me. He could have easily said that, going into the merge, his tribe was way down in numbers and he was able to still make it to the end. So I think that would have been a really compelling argument. So looking back at it now, I think, that would have been a really even match as well.
So you kind of answered the question I was going to ask you was, what percentage of the decision to bring Martha to the end was what you said at the show, which was that you made the deal with her first. Was it more about that, or was it more about the jury's perception of your move to take Martha to the end?
I think really it was about 50-50. It was a little bit of both. And I really did go back and forth. But I really didn't think I was going to win that last immunity challenge. So I knew I had deals with them both, and I thought that's great because then, the decision's not going to be up to me anyway because there's no way I'm going to win the last immunity challenge. So up until that point, I hadn't even really given it much thought. Then when it was my turn to make the decision, I did go back and forth a lot, and then ultimately decided to keep my promise to Martha because we had just voted out Maggie, and that was another promise that I had broken. So I decided to keep my promise to Martha because I really like the idea of the two of us in the final two. And I like the idea of Darren and I in the final two as well, but we had been talking about it a lot more with Martha. And then yeah, I think it would have made me look not so good in the jury's eyes.
So
And then
how crucial do you think those last two wins for you were?
well, I had no idea that I was probably going to be voted out if I hadn't won them. And it's a really good thing that I didn't know that, because I think then if under pressure, I probably wouldn't have won them.
Hmm.
That's something that I found out afterwards. I was really surprised actually, and I think for any player, when you get a little bit too comfortable and you start feeling like you know exactly what's going on and like you're on top of it, that's usually where you get voted out. So I think that was what was starting to happen with me, and so it's a really good thing that I actually won them so that I didn't get voted out.
A couple more things I wanted to touch on tribal counts with you. So you got everyone's vote in the final tribal council except for Maggie's and Kyle's. Were you surprised not to get those two votes, or were those two votes you were expecting to go Martha's way?
I was not expecting to get Maggie's vote. That was, just pretty clear that she would never vote for me, knowing that Martha was there. Which again is why I voted her out, because they were closer. I don't care what they said; they were definitely closer than probably any other pair in the game. Kyle's vote, I don't know who I was expecting him to vote for. It didn't really surprise me. And I heard after the fact that originally Michael was going to vote for Martha and Kyle was going to vote for me, and then both of them ended up switching their minds. So that sort of surprised me a little bit more than anything else. Just that both of them had changes of heart at tribal council. Um, but I understand why either of them would want to vote for Martha. I think she played a great game.
So during that whole tribal council scene, oh, who's that? Is this your biggest fan?
You could say that in a way. No, he hasn't watched any of the episodes.
Is he still proud of you?
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. He wanted to know as soon as that was my husband, by the way, for anyone watching. As soon as we finished the game, he wanted to know who won, and then when I told him that I won, he was like, "Oh, okay, well, I guess I don't have to watch the episodes now that I know the outcome."
Well, and you made, I'm going to bring it now so we don't forget, you made the biggest trek out of anyone on Heiko Reality to compete in the game. It wasn't a quick drive to the mountains
Yes.
for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I flew up from the Bay Area actually. So yeah, it was quite the trek, but it was definitely worth it.
Yeah, good thing it all worked out. The other thing about the final tribal council, what did you think of some of the criticisms or comments that were made about Martha's game, specifically from Darren um, at the end of tribal council? Now, we talked to Darren, and he says, going back, he regrets some of what he says about Martha being too emotional, because he said that yes, he thought she was emotional, but he thought she actually made strategic decisions, and then the emotion was a result of that. What were you
Mhm.
thinking as it seemed like Martha was getting a harsher reaction from the jury than you were?
Yeah, that was really surprising to me, and it was one of those things where, on the one hand, he was really supporting me, so I'm not going to interject, and tell him
Yeah.
that he's wrong. But at the same time, I do think that it was a little bit, it was a little bit harsh. It was a little bit much. You know, it's hard to say because I didn't have a good friend like that in the game, and so if I had to, that's my cat.
Oh, you have another fan here.
Yeah, she's my number one fan. Um, if I had had such a close friend in the game, maybe it would have been more difficult for me as well. Maybe I would have been a little bit more emotional also. So it's hard to say. I wasn't in that position, which I think was actually a really big advantage for me. But it's understandable, and I agree that even though Martha was a little bit more emotional about things, she obviously made very strategic moves, and everything that she did was her strategy. So I don't think that you can really criticize her on that. The one thing that I would say is that's kind of why I lost Kyle's vote, though,
Yeah.
from what it looks like. So, um, you know, it's all good.
All right. Well, now, Shandy, I want to ask about kind of your overall game. About what was your strategy going into this All Star season, and how did that match what actually played out for you?
So going into it, I hadn't really thought about trying to. I didn't think that I would be sort of in between alliances, but that that's just something that sort of came up as the game went on because of the people that were voted out and how they were voted out, um, and that was definitely a part of the strategy I hadn't anticipated, but I think it was probably my strongest strategic play.
Yeah, and how did you what did you think of yourself watching the show? Do you think the show accurately portrayed your strategy? Are there any gaps to your strategy that you thought the show left out?
Um, that's a good question. I think things were captured pretty accurately. There are always times where we're always focused on ourselves. And so obviously when I'm watching the episodes, I'm going to be focused on myself. And then even more so knowing that I end up winning the game. So moves like voting out Kyle, I really felt like that was thanks to me. And in the episode, I don't think it came across as strongly. But again, that's just because that's how I saw things. But it was really brilliant on Amanda's part. She was really, key in that. So just depending on who you're focusing on, you could see that move differently. So she definitely needs to get, the credit that she got in the episode. There were a couple times where people referred to it as like Martha's move, and that was the only thing where I was like, oh, it was kind of my move. But again, it was everyone in the alliance that agreed to it. So to a certain extent, it really was everyone's move. But other than that, I think I felt like everything was really accurately portrayed.
All right, well, we actually had a question about one of your specific game moves here. A viewer wrote in and asked, what made you decide to go with Martha and Maggie instead of Amanda and Darren at the final five? It seemed like you and Darren were closer.
Um, so that group of people it's a really complicated group. So the thing with Amanda is that everyone loves her. She's awesome. She's really good with words, and she's also really physical. And so we all knew that if we went up against her in the end, we would lose to her. That was the general consensus among everyone. And then we also knew that if we kept her in the game for much longer, she would probably go on an immunity run. So it was really key to get Amanda out at that point at Final Five. Before then, it actually worked out really well to my favor to keep her in there because she was a bigger target, and that allowed me to kind of do my own thing every now and then come back and reunite against Amanda, trying to get her out. So I wouldn't have gone with the three of them at Final Five, largely because of that. The other thing with Darren and my relationship is that was also complicated because I went into the game wanting to work with him, but as soon as he was on the other tribe at the very beginning, I had kind of told myself that, okay, even if we both make it to the merge, he will have played the whole game with other people, and I knew enough about Darren's gameplay to know that he'll tell every single person exactly what they want to hear, and so I knew that he would be hard to trust. Um, Despite that, I started trusting him a lot, but still always with a little bit of reservation. So that's why I didn't go with them. On the other side, I had Martha and Maggie. Uh, I had, the final three alliance with, and at that point in the game, that was still something that we were considering, or that we could at least use to try to keep us together. And I knew that I wanted to go to the end with Martha. What was difficult for me was that I wanted to go to the end with Martha and Darren, and so figuring out how that would work was the hardest part. But it was really important to get Amanda out. I feel like if I would have gone with Amanda and Darren, we would have voted out Maggie, I guess, and then it would have been Martha, Darren, Amanda, and me. And Amanda had a really good chance of winning those last two immunities, and I'm sure she would have taken Darren to the end because they were much closer. And then again, even if she would have taken me to the end, I would have lost. So that's why ultimately I decided to stick with my original alliance. And I don't think that there was ever really that much doubt in my mind that I would stick with Martha and Maggie at that point. I don't think I was ever. I mean, I could be wrong. I have to look at some of my interviews at the time, but I don't think I was ever seriously considering going with Amanda and Darren.
Well, the one thing that I even told you this as the season was airing, which was a part of your strategy that I didn't fully grasp out there in the game, but going back and going through all the footage, it obviously came up, is that you were very particular in making sure the people you sent home were people that were not going to stick with you to the end. Which is, I think, why you justified your decision to take out Kyle and Michael, even against the wishes of Martha and Maggie, which is why you were so willing to get rid of Sigrid. How key was that for your strategy to only keep people in who were going to stay close to you?
I think that was huge, and that's how I got to the end, and I think that's how ultimately I won because, um, I coming into the merge, we had this great alliance of five, but I was at the bottom of that. Well, I mean, I was either third or I was fifth, depending on what happened.
Hmm.
Uh, so it was really important to get rid of those people who I knew wouldn't take me and who were also more physical than me. Um, and then moving forward, I just kept doing the same thing, and I just wanted to make sure that I got into a position where I felt more comfortable because for a lot of the time, I did feel slightly outnumbered, even though I was in the majority alliance. Within all those alliances, I was constantly feeling outnumbered because, again, like I said a couple of times, I didn't have a pair. So even in a situation where you have, three people, I would still be the odd person out. Um, so yeah, that's what a lot of the maneuvering was about, was trying um, to get rid of people that wouldn't take me, but and to break up the bigger groups that would then be able to vote me out if they wanted to.
You had a couple of interesting relationships that were fun to follow on the show. Could you talk a little bit more about your relationship with Maggie on the show? Because you guys definitely were very tight right from the beginning. You guys both gave us interviews in the first episode that said, we haven't really talked yet, but we trust each other. And then
Yeah.
as we get farther and farther the game, it was this kind of distrust that you guys had that you could never really shake off.
Yeah, it was really interesting how that played out because in our original tribe, going into it, when I saw who was on the tribe, I was like, okay, I can probably trust Brent. He'll probably want to play the game with me. And then I saw Maggie, and just knowing what I knew about her from her season, she just seemed like a person that I could trust and get along with really well. I think that's important. You have to be able to get along with these people. So I knew that we'd be able to get along. And I don't know, I think in a way maybe we were similar just in that we were two women in this alliance that didn't really have strong relationships with anyone else together. And we were very close, and we did all of our strategizing together for the first half of the game. But I do feel like as soon as I sort of forced the Kyle vote, after that, she didn't see me the same way, I think. And it would be interesting to see what she has to say about that. Because that's really the point where I felt the change. And just the way that she would talk to me and look at me, I felt like she didn't trust me as much. And because for the first time, also, instead of coming to an agreement together, I was a little bit more pushy about that. So I can understand also if she stopped trusting me at that point. She was probably correct in doing so because at the end of the day, voting out Kyle was more in my best interest than in hers because Kyle did want to take her to the final four. Um, but yeah, and at the very end, I did feel really bad about voting her out. I don't regret it by any means. But after that, she gave me a hug at the finale, and we've kept in contact after that point. So outside of the game, there are no hard feelings, but it was interesting how that played out during the game.
Yeah. The other interesting relationship I wanted to talk about, and there actually was a question about this. Um, Someone wrote in and asked, "Are you glad that Connor was taken out before the merge? It seems like you struggled to know how to play the game with him." It was kind of a storyline that was brewing. That I mean, Connor was one of the people who made sure you get voted off in the first season, and you kind of had this. You were the one that always was kind of throwing Connor a bone that like maybe you wanted to work with him, but you seemed conflicted the whole time. Would you have stuck with Connor at the merge?
That's really hard to say. But that question is spot on. My feelings coming into the game, Connor was another person that I had, like once you saw who was coming for All Stars, I had sort of looked at Connor as somebody who I could potentially work with because, since he was instrumental in my vote off in Beartooth Mountains, I thought that nobody would expect us to work together. I thought that people would assume that there would be animosity. But Connor also, he's really good at the game, and I think it's good to have to play with people who are good so that you can strategize with them. Um, and then also, he's such a villain from his season, so I knew he would be a target. So if you're aligned with somebody who's always on people's minds, they're going to target that person before they target you. So that was another good thing. And then just from the little I know about Connor, I also get along with really well. So going into the game, I really did want to work with him, but it was all messed up from the very beginning uh, because of his relationship with Rachel. I would say because I knew that I didn't want to work with her, and a lot of other people didn't want to work with her either, and so she was a target really early on, and they were so close from like the first moment of the game. So that really hindered things. I would have liked him to be in our original core alliance, but that was something also that I couldn't really push too much because I didn't want everyone else to get suspicious. And that's kind of how the my relationship with Connor went throughout the whole game. Is like I couldn't make it too obvious, and I couldn't really advocate for him that much because I didn't want people getting suspicious of me and wondering why I would want him around and what was going on there.
So, with all these relationships you had with all these different people, which relationship in the game do you think ended up being the most important to your win? Whose bond or whose alliance do you think in the end was the most important?
Well, it's hard to think of just one. I almost have to give you two answers. My initial thought is Martha. Um, she was somebody else that I knew I would be able to get along with, and I knew that we'd be able to strategize together. So going into the game, I was like, okay, I want to play with Martha. She also ended up on the other tribe, and I was afraid with her too that if we met up at the merge, she would have been playing, the whole game with other people, and so it would have just been impossible for us, kind of like Brent and Michael. But luckily, her coming over to our tribe at the swap was perfect because that really allowed us to start working together closely from that point forward and to develop trust and really make a really, really strong alliance. Um, I talked to her about everything. The only thing that I didn't tell her was when I was going to vote out Michael, I obviously couldn't tell them that before the vote. But everything else, we talked about together. So we really played the game very closely together. So that was really, really important. But then I have to say also that Darren, obviously, and to some extent Amanda, were also really key players, really key relationships. Because if it hadn't been for them, if I hadn't been able to work with them at certain times, then I wouldn't have been able to make the moves that I wanted to make. So it's hard to say just one person.
So, would you, if you had to compare both experiences, did you have a more overall positive experience the second time around, or what's your favorite experience?
Well, I mean, obviously, I played the game for much longer the second time around. The first one was really short lived. I had a great time the first time also. It was fun while I was there, and then I stuck around after it was over and got to see kind of what was going on behind the scenes. So I remember at Beartooth Mountains when Sigurd was about to get voted out, it was like pandemonium, behind the scenes because everyone had a little bit of an idea about what was going to go on based on people's confessionals. But then, people were still waiting to see like were people actually going to play the idols and how that would work out. So that was really fun. And then the second time around, it was funny that little storyline repeated itself, and I got to see it from the other side. And I, the whole time imagining what the production crew was thinking when that was happening. But yeah, it was definitely more fun to play the game for longer, and obviously more fun to win it. So I can't really say that I enjoyed the second time less.
Yeah,
But yeah, it was a totally different experience for sure.
yeah. So we're almost out of time here, but the first season you were on, you were very popular. In fact, I went back and looked at the episode that you get voted off, and I believe one of our commenters, or excuse me, the episode after Martha got voted off in Hellrun Plateau, commented that please bring back Martha, please bring back Shandy, perfect final two and all stars. So you definitely lived up to your fans' expectations. What was that like going through this experience again and receiving such a positive reaction from the fans again?
It was really awesome to have such a positive reaction. I really didn't think that it was going to be like that this time. I didn't think that I was going to be a fan favorite. I was sure that it would be more like Amanda and Martha who would be, and Darren. Darren's hilarious. I don't know how he wasn't number one in fan favorites. But yeah, and I told myself that's obviously fine, knowing that I win. I don't need to also be fan favorite. But it was a nice surprise that it turned out like that.
So any last comments you have on the experience as a whole, as being
Um,
reigning champ of Hyco Reality?
it was a really great time, and I'm so glad that I did it. I knew that it would be worth it no matter what I placed. The whole game, I wasn't allowing myself to really think that I could win it. But obviously, I'm really happy that it worked out that way. It makes it even that much better.
Well, it was a delight to have you on the show twice, and congratulations once again, a job well done.
Thank you.